Welcome to the show, where we share the stories of the many who intersect with our healthcare system but are rarely heard from. My name is Kevin Poe, founder and editor of Kevin MD. Rate and review the show at kevinmd.com/rate. Subscribe at kevinmd.com/follow. Today in the show, we have Amanda Brisebois. She is an internal medicine physician in Canada, and her Kevin MD article is titled Misaligned Expectations Lead to Conflict, Burnout, and Disillusioned Physician Leaders. Amanda, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here, Kevin.
We'll get into the article in a little bit. First off, briefly share your story and journey to where you are today.
I started medicine as a bit of a unknown. I never even knew what physicians did. I was just a high achiever. Ended up in palliative medicine and general internal medicine, and really was a clinician to the core. Loved to teach and mentor students. And then I started seeing gaps in chronic illness care, and I thought, I'm going to go and work on coaching patients. And this is when I got my wellness coaching certification, and then that led to executive coaching certification. And as I saw the gaps in how we integrate patients with our care, I started to see a lot of gaps in the process in the health system, and as physicians, how we get heard. So I thought, I'm going to start leadership and start to get involved so I can make a difference and really learn how we can integrate the physician voice. So I started doing that as a facility chief in my organization, and then moved up to a medical director, which started right when the pandemic hit. And I felt very unprepared. As physicians, we don't get educated in a lot of these things that we're being asked to do these days. So during the pandemic, to help my brain focus and cope with the pandemic, I did a whole bunch of training to catch up. So I did a master's in health leadership. I did conflict negotiation mediation training, equity, diversity, and inclusion training, health information training. Really, I don't know what I was thinking, but I thought that was the gap. I thought that here we are as physicians, and as a high-level leader, they're asking me to do all these things with quality and leadership and wellness and equity. I better learn it. There's something wrong with me. So I did all of that, and I realized that that actually wasn't the problem. So I understand all of that now, but I thought initially it was teaching physicians in medical school how to do this work. But now I'm thinking we've got this all wrong. And our organizations have morphed into these massive organizations where physicians are just a small piece. And we have so much to learn in medical school and residency about clinical work. Why are we expected to know how to be a perfect leader, know how to be a conflict or a negotiator? I didn't know what I was doing through a lot of those leadership roles because I didn't have the training. And so what's happened is I was thinking about going into higher leadership roles, and I realized that the organizations may not be looking for leaders who are really integrating the physician voice. They might be looking for leaders who are integrating their strategic plans into the physician plans. And I started to get concerned because through the pandemic, I saw enormous amounts of conflict. And the conflict between teams disintegrating. We're losing physicians. They're thinking about quitting their profession. They get up in the morning and don't want to go to work because there's some behavior that's not making them feel included, or they don't want to deal with in the work environment. And it's impacting patient care and team environment. So this is where I started thinking, I really want to start leading from the middle. And I stepped down from my medical director role, although I do still have some high-level leadership roles in different capacity, mostly to support physicians through conflict. And I've taken on some other roles to do this, which is great that our organizations are supporting. So now I'm really looking at how do we support physicians through conflict? But it's not only that, it's looking upstream in what's caused the conflict. And I really believe that these misaligned expectations, that we're supposed to take on all of this work, including our clinical work, which is morphed into massive amounts of knowledge, that we can't do it. And we're starting to realize, and burnout and conflict is arising because of that huge, enormous burden that we're facing. And we're physicians, we want to do it. But I have multiple people telling me, I'm not trained to manage this behavior. I'm not trained to manage this conflict. You know, I spent 4 hours sitting in my car in the garage one day, talking to someone, hoping to support them, thinking that was okay and that was enough. But that wasn't the right approach. I didn't know the approach. So now that I know all of these approaches, I don't think everyone has to do that. But I think as organizations, we need to support physicians. And we need to get the quality people at the table to talk to our physicians and really integrate them and get them involved in human resources like we do for our nurses and our physiotherapists and our occupational therapists. And they help us talk about retirement and leaves of absence and wellness and complaints and conflict. They do all that for these employees. They just don't do it for us because we're independent practitioners.
Now, when you talk about the conflicts that you saw as you moved up the leadership ranks, so go into more detail. Tell us a story of an example of such a conflict that you would see physicians face.
A lot of the problems arise from behavior that are maybe not intended to be poor, but there's different cultures between people. They approach situations differently. And we're very attuned these days to how we should talk to each other. So, for example, I'll have a physician on the ward and a nurse will be there, and the physician is a very assertive person. And that's their personality. They've been raised that way. They talk to people in a very stern way, if I can use that word. And they'll ask for something. I need this. And it's a very sort of intense approach. And the nurse will take offense because they'll feel that person is angry at them. And because they don't know each other, the nurse and the physician will notice tension, but move on. And then that may happen again. And the physician is unaware because they're unaware. I've had people from military backgrounds or just people that get things done and that's how they do it. They're not aware that they're causing problems. And then all of a sudden they get a complaint. Because this has happened 3 times. And they say, I don't even know what happened. I don't know what they're talking about. And the nurse or whoever it was that complained writes this huge letter about the behavior. And the physician writes this letter back that I don't know what they're talking about. And there's not much support for them. So they can go to their leader who's not really trained in conflict. So they say, I don't really know. I guess we'll get everyone's perspectives, and you can sometimes not even know they're the same situation. And then often what physicians have told me is that nothing happens. So they say, well, all right, I don't really know what happened. No one sits down and talks to them and listens and says, hey, how do you approach conflict? Did you know that there's these 4 different approaches for people to look at things? Some people are really introspective, and some people are very methodical and think on things a long time and quiet, and others are very aggressive and assertive. I couldn't use the word aggressive, but assertive. So I think that we don't think about that. We get into a bit of a difficulty and we walk away because we're busy, when really that difference of opinion is a massive opportunity. And that's what I'm trying to get across by these discussions, is that when you see someone and they're talking to you in a way, and I tell my residents and trainees this too, is that if someone is very assertive with me and it feels wrong, I'll say to them, something feels wrong. You know, are you okay? Or have I done something that's upset you in some way? And I'll say it really nicely. And sometimes I even do a little tear on my face and they laugh. So it sort of diffuses the situation. But I just say, I've had a pretty tough day. Or is that an intention that I haven't done something right? Because I'm really hoping to work with you as a colleague and I really want to get things done together and we have common goals. And the second you say something like that in the moment, people usually say, oh, no, I'm swamped. I can't even keep my head on straight because I have 8 calls and emerge and I'm just trying to take care of this patient. And then the nurse can say, well, how can I help you? So it can really change for an opportunity. And then those people start to know each other. So one of them say, oh, my kid was just, you know, had their tooth pulled and I'm running around, my wife's doing this or my partner's doing this. And then next time you have a thing, you say to them, oh, is there something going on with your kids again? So you really start to know each other, and there's stuff out there talking about this as humble leadership. So really knowing the people around you. And if you make a comment when you know someone, you're not going to take it the same way if you don't know them. I always use the analogy of driving by someone in a car. If they cut you off, you might do something not very appropriate. But if they drive by and I go say, hey, oh, that's Kevin. I might just wave at you and say, oh, I know he had a pretty busy day. I'm not going to be worried at all. So it's about knowing people in the workplace. And this is where I'm really trying to help people get through these enormous conflicts. And that's a very simple one. There's ones that are extremely intense where teams are fractured, fighting over call, fighting over being on leaves of absence, not wanting to let other people go because there's not staff to cover, not being heard in meetings, not having process on how to make decisions within a team. There's a list of many things that are recurring.
Sure. Sure.
So those are things that teams start to fracture. And then when they fracture, they have difficulties even trading call.
So let's talk more about this. In your Kevin MD article, it's titled Misaligned Expectations Lead to Conflict, Burnout, and Disillusioned Physician Leaders. Now, for those who didn't get a chance to read that article, just walk my audience through it. Share the story why you decided to write it.
Well, I'm writing my master's thesis for my international health leadership master's. And I had to think of something to write about, and it really evolved over the master's, but it came to this point where I thought, where has the physician voice gone? And why can't I get the front lines heard in these high-level leadership positions? I'm an ACMO of my organization. There's only 5 of us, and it's a huge organization. What's happening? And it sounds like the people around me want to hear me. They're nice to me. They talk to me. Where is the problem? And so I started thinking about that, and I started thinking about why physicians are so stressed, where the frontline voice has gone. And I'm really realizing, as I was mentioning before, that we're not being asked to do the things we were trained to do. So yes, we're supposed to do clinical care, and we're running around trying to do that. And then we're asked to see 30 patients in one night to admit them. And then also work the next day, and then talk to families all night, and then be on call the next day. And I thought, why aren't we able to figure this out? I had to be on the phone with somebody, and I said, you have to go in. Like, these patients have to be seen. You're on call. And they said, I'm exhausted. And I really changed by that conversation, because I do believe that the system has to run, but we're asking our physicians to make those changes. And I thought to myself, we really need the organizations and someone who's an expert in health systems operations to come in and work with us as clinicians to change the system, not to ask us to change it in our free time. And we should be paid for that work. And so that started the article. I thought, why aren't we being trained? Why aren't the goals being clearly aligned? Why aren't the expectations about what we're supposed to provide consistent? Because we come into organizations that have strategic plans that I don't think a lot of us are even aware of. So how do we get the physician voice? And I'm really trying to get organizations to see that we're physicians and we are excellent at patient care. When we want to be leaders, we do need additional training. And when we want to be involved in quality, we do also need additional training. And same thing with wellness and all of these things. They train their nurses who are employees in leadership on their time. They get paid and they send them to courses. And not every organization's the same, obviously. But I feel because people think physicians are independent practitioners, we do well, we've got a good profession, that they should continue to take on more and more work. And I think this is where the conflict's coming from, the burnout is coming from. And if we actually lead organizations and our colleagues to say, we can actually step up and say, I understand you've asked me to do this project, and you've asked me to put through a project charter. This happened to me just yesterday with financial information on it. So put together a project charter, give me the expenses, put through a proposal. And I've done a few, but I had to go on YouTube and try to figure this out. And why can't they give me someone to do that? And just, I can write through what kind of things I need. So I wasted a lot of time. So this is where the article came from. And I thought, how can we support physicians to get back to medicine? And it all evolved from the conflict I'm seeing, but the conflict, I believe, is from these misalignments, communication gaps, collaboration gaps, lack of goal alignment, and really expectation differences, and not taking the time to sit down and say, this is how we can integrate clinical medicine into these other things that these massive organizations have morphed into. We're just a tiny piece of this puzzle now. And so this is what I'm hoping that we can start the conversation going. I hope that organizations will start to step up and provide this kind of training like they do for other people in their organizations, because most of our leaders have to take time off clinical work
Sure.
and pay for the training themselves like I did. I put a lot of money into all that training, and now there's all these expertise, but it doesn't seem like they really want to absorb that. I think the organizations really they have health leaders with them and working with them. They have health organization and system leaders who know how the systems work. And we need to know what they're thinking in order to get our voice heard. So that's where it came from. And that was the whole point of the article, to really help us think, what do we need to tell organizations and ourselves about where we stop?
Hmm. Now, you talk about additional training for these physicians who want to become leaders and having less of physicians doing this on their own dollar and their own time. Now, from the individual physician standpoint, is there anything that they can do to make their voices heard? Any proactive things that individual physicians can do?
I think so. So as a facility chief, when I was a facility chief of medicine, I went to my organizational leaders and I said, well, what do you have for everyone else?
Hmm.
Because I need something and I'm a physician and I want to be involved. I want to be part of your team. And they actually had this huge year-long health leadership integrated course that physicians never attended. So I didn't get paid to go. The nurses got paid to go, but it was a fantastic experience. They invited me
Hmm.
and I learned so much about the organization. I also went to the CMO a couple of years ago when I got the medical director role. And I said, look, I would really like to learn and be better. And they said, I wonder if your colleagues in these ACMO roles would also want to be better. And they ended up providing us executive coaching. And I think you have to ask.
Hmm.
I had a leader reach out to me. I have a new role as a physician advisor. And just yesterday, she reached out to me. She's taking over a leadership role in a really difficult department. They have a lot of issues going on. And she said, will you coach me? And I love teaching. I love mentoring. I'm
Hmm.
like, absolutely, because she wants to go into the position with eyes open and really get some advice. So get a mentor. A lot of physicians are really willing to mentor and they're willing to do it for free. So if you have someone that has the training in your organization, or if your organization will listen, ask. We have to advocate for ourselves. We have to say, hands up, I'm not trained for this. I need support. And this is one of the reasons our organization undertook this position that I'm in, as enough people said, we need help
Hmm.
and we're not trained to do it. And so I do see change at front. I think physicians have to know that we've got to advocate for ourselves and that we're really clinicians, and that it's okay if we are not certain about our leadership skills and our equity, diversity, and inclusion skills and all of these quality skills and project management. And it's massive. So we're fine not knowing that. I think we have to give ourselves a pat on the back that we're trying to integrate all that. And if you love it, go for
Hmm.
it. Get the extra training. I loved getting the extra training. But I think people who love medicine, we're going to drive them out of seeing patients if we continue to load on more and more and more and more. And when you look at health information technology, we are all having more and more asks. I did an extra course in that too.
Sure.
Like
Sure.
there's so much. So I think we really just have to be kind to ourselves and recognize, what am I trained for? What do I actually want to do in my job? Because if I'm not happy when I get up and too stressed and I have too much to do in the 24 hours in my day, then I'm not going to enjoy my work and I'm going to look for something else. So that's the message I would like to get out. We advocate for ourselves. We know that it's okay if we're not trained in all of these things. We're not supposed to be.
Hmm.
And really focus on what we're good at and what we want to do. And if you start to morph your career in something else that you want to do, like you and I have done, that's fantastic. But recognize what it is.
Sure. We're talking to Amanda Brisebois. She's an internal medicine physician in Canada. Her Kevin MD article is titled Misaligned Expectations Lead to Conflict, Burnout, and Disillusioned Physician Leaders. Amanda, what are some of your take-home messages that you want to leave with the Kevin MD audience?
As physicians, we need to take charge of our careers. We need to integrate with our organizations and be really open and honest with them about what we can do and can't do. And when we're asked to do things that we are not trained to do, we need to go to our leaders, high-level leaders, and
Hmm.
say, what can we do to help you? Because we need your help too. And just really be clear that we understand that this is too much for one person to do together, and we need to work as a team. When we work as a team, the organizations will function better, and I think they'll hear our voice better. So that's what I would suggest. Just let's talk about this stuff and be aware of it.
Amanda, thank you so much for sharing your time and insight. Thanks again for being on the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Kevin.